Welcome to the Clarity Coach Podcast with Rockie Lee, strategic intervention coach, specializing with singles and couples, helping them find clarity in life, in relationships, and in personal development. And now, here's your host.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome again. And we are here at episode 17 of Clarity Coach Love Talks. And I have with me again my co-host, Kimberly, who'll be joining us in the conversation today to talk about expectations and why they are the root of all disconnection.
Hi there, Rockie, and hello to all of our listeners. I'm really looking forward to this conversation about expectations in relationships. I'm definitely with you on how it's the root of all disconnection and can't wait to hear about what it means for couples and how to adjust their approach when it comes to love and relationships. Let's get started with what you would say is a huge stumbling block for married couples when it comes to communication.
Yes, so like our title for our episode, it is expectations. So what happens is for couples, their inability to communicate what they need from their partner without an expectation, that is the huge stumbling block. We are just so used to communicating with our feelings through an expectation that we don't really know how else to communicate the things that we're actually needing from our partner. So that's really the huge stumbling block. How do we communicate without an expectation?
So what is an expectation?
Well, in short, an expectation would be me saying, I expect you to make me feel happy. Now, we don't ever really come out loud and say it that way. Sometimes we might, but most of the times we don't. We're actually saying this in our head. But what we might normally say out loud is, you need to do it this way, or you need to be like this, or you should not behave like this, or you could have done this way better instead, or what's wrong with you? You should have done it this way. So as a general rule, anytime you hear yourself say the words should or could in a sentence, beware, because there's usually an expectation that's attached to that.
And what makes this so damaging or harmful when it comes to relationships?
Well, expectations disconnects us from our partners, and it does so in a couple of different ways. So number one, it causes us to not truly accept our partner for who they are, right? Because we're actually expecting them to be something other than who they are. Number two, it causes us to not see them truly for who they are because we can't, right? Because we're already expecting them to be something else. Number three, it causes us to love them conditionally. In other words, what we're really saying is, I want to love you only upon services rendered, right? So if I do something for you, then or you do something for me, then great. I will love you. And that's essentially what an expectation does, is it makes it conditional. Number four, it causes us to not trust our partner. And so many people are struggling with trust. What they don't realize is that trust is actually the byproduct of me actually setting up an expectation for my partner. So if I expect them to be a certain way or to behave a certain way or show up a certain way and they don't do it, now inside of me, I'm already preconditioned to not trust them. Another one is that expectation sets us up to not truly listen. Now, this is really the big cause of communication breakdowns, because every time I have an expectation on my spouse, whatever my spouse is trying to say to me, guess what I'm doing? I'm really not listening. I'm actually listening to what my spouse is saying through my filter of like, how do I get what I need out of this? And how do I take what they're saying to me and, spin it so that they have to give me what I need, right? That's kind of what we're trying to do. So an expectation in general stops us from truly listening. And sorry for my little nasal breathing there, but my allergies are just driving me crazy here today. But to get to my final point here, when I'm giving an expectation, what I'm really doing is that I'm believing that my partner is to blame for how I feel. That's one of the most damaging things that we can do to our relationship, is that when I set up an expectation, whatever doesn't work, I'm automatically blaming my partner for now how I feel.
Makes sense. So not taking accountability for your own reaction to the situation.
That's right. That's right. It's purely a blame.
And there's no doubt about it. Everybody has expectations. Where do you think expectations actually come from?
Yeah, this is the easy part. So whether we like it or not, all our expectations comes from our fears and insecurities. So in reality, it's the insecurities that we actually feel the most, but it's actually generated by our fear. So what we end up doing is that we typically fear not getting what we think we want, or we have a fear of not getting what we believe we must have in order for me to feel happy. So we typically move from making a request of our partner to we switch to trying to control them, or we demand that they follow us or take our lead because we believe that we're right. So we do this because what we're really longing for as a partner is we're looking for certainty in our relationship. But what we end up thinking is that if I can just control the situation, I'll get certainty. The rub is that control is not the same as certainty.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why expectations sets us up for disconnection with our partner, because we're now really more driven out of our fear and our insecurities, and we do that by trying to control them instead of actually making a request that would allow us to experience certainty.
So in a marriage specifically, what would be some examples of couples having expectations in their marriage?
Yeah, great question. I'll give like three really basic examples. So one example would be like, say, a wife wanting the husband to stop drinking, and that if the partner didn't stop drinking, the marriage would be over. So let's just say that the husband does stop drinking, but now the wife who demanded this expectation actually never makes ground in becoming closer or intimate with her spouse, her husband. So here's an example of an expectation of stop drinking so that we can be closer. But then when he did that, they actually never got closer, right? So that's one example. Another example would be, say, a husband wanting the wife to be really interested in what he likes to do. So she actually goes out of her way to do that. She shows interest in what the husband is doing. But the funny thing is that he never really creates the space for her to actually participate in that. So he makes the complaint that, hey, I expect you to really be interested in my hobby or passion or whatever it is. But then he doesn't really actually go out of his way to create the life for her to participate in that.
But I don't want you to actually come to the baseball game with me, honey.
Exactly. That's a perfect example, right? So I get this a lot, especially when it comes to like guys who like riding motorbikes, and they're like, well, I want you to be interested in it. And so they do. And then they're like, no, but I don't want you to be riding with me though, right?
Exactly.
So that's kind of what real life expectations would kind of look like.
Catch-22 there.
Exactly. So yeah, so these are really great examples that you and I have both just shared. And in the reality, when you look at these examples, what we're really doing is we're forcing an expectation on our partner, but we're actually not becoming any closer, even though the expectation is being met. So that's the tension with an expectation, is that I'll set up a scenario of what my wife will need to do. And then when she achieves it, I actually will move the goalpost. I'll actually say, oh, that's not good enough yet. And that's really the danger with an expectation.
Yeah, sounds very unfair. I see we're up against a commercial break. We'll be back in a couple short minutes to continue our conversation with Rockie Lee.
More with Rockie Lee, strategic intervention coach and host of the Clarity Coach podcast after this.
Having clarity in our lives is of the utmost importance. Clarity is the pathway to change, the juice that gets us up in the morning, the purpose that inspires us to strive for something greater. Clarity is also the ability to see things in a different way than how we believe them to be, giving us options to the possibilities that surround us. Clarity gives us the courage to bring change to the issues that hinder us from believing for a better tomorrow. Rockie Lee is a strategic intervention coach and will help you find clarity in life, in relationships, and in personal development. For more information on Clarity Coach workshops or to book a coaching session with Rockie Lee, call us at 778-883-7203. That's 778-883-7203. Or visit us online at www.claritycoach.ca/bookings. That's www.claritycoach.ca/bookings.
Now, back to Rockie Lee, strategic intervention coach and host of the Clarity Coach podcast.
Hi there, Rockie. We're back from commercial break. Thanks to all of our listeners for joining us today. Now, what I want to know, Rockie, is how do we move off the path of expectations?
Great question. And it all starts by just recognizing that what we're trying to do to our partner is an expectation. So just recognizing it already takes us off of that path. But we want to take it a little step further. We want to understand that when I'm in this process of an expectation, what I'm trying to do is make somebody responsible for making me happy. So that's kind of really what I want to truly recognize first, right? So if I can understand that, oh, what I'm doing and saying right now is I'm trying to make my wife or my husband responsible for making me feel happy, oh, there's the expectation. So the minute I acknowledge that, right there, I'm off the path. Now, here's some signs that you can kind of pay attention to that will help you understand that these might, in fact, be more of an expectation. So, number one, anytime I encounter stress, a negative emotion, or when I hear my choice of words come out in a particular way, such as you should have, you could have, it should have been this way, or you need to trust me because I'm right. Any of these signs are key indicators that what I'm actually propositioning my spouse on is really an expectation. So that's kind of what I really want to do first to move off the path. The second thing is I want to start understanding how to communicate a need. I want to try and figure out, what if I just, instead of saying what I expect them to do, how about if I reword that to communicating to them, honey, this is what I need right now. And here are 3 options for you. Could you do option 1, 2, or 3? Because that would really help me experience this need. Just by doing that simple exercise will already move you right off the path of an expectation.
So out of curiosity, Rockie, I've heard you talk about value before. Would a value really make a difference?
Yeah, that's a perfect thing that you just helped us segue into. You're right. Shifting into focusing on a value would absolutely take us off the path of an expectation. And let me explain why. Values are so important for us. Think of like a business. If I run a business and I don't have any set values of what my business is about, I'm actually going to be so swayed by people's opinions, right? And so if we look at, so Kimberly and I, for those of you that are listening, we're from Vancouver, the city of Vancouver in Canada and British Columbia. And we have a hockey team here called the Vancouver Canucks. And they've been suffering the last, say 5-6 years because the management or the leadership of that team, they weren't clear about the values of that team. And that's why they've been floundering. So now that we've got a new regime in, a new management team in, they've suddenly reestablished what the values are for that team, and they've gone about constructing a team based on that value. Well, our marriage is no different. So every time I don't function in my marriage off a set of values, I'm actually going to lean more towards the expectation. I'll keep driving the expectation, but the problem is that I'll keep moving my marriage off course. I'll never really get more intimate, or I'll never feel closer with my wife. So a value is actually a great thing to add in your marriage that would remove you off of, a said expectation.
So what would that look like in real life in an actual marriage?
Yeah. So here's some like practical values that you could anchor your marriage to that would shift you off of an expectation. For example, a value of like no mean words or labels, or a value that says, let's just be grateful, or a value that says, hey, let's not complain, or another value that says let's not blame each other. So any of these values that we place in front of us will already help shift our expectation, right? Some other values could be like treating each other in ways that would be kind and loving and honoring, or controlling our temper, or being consistent in communication, right? Carving out time to communicate instead of saying, you don't love me anymore, you don't talk with me, right? It's by simply looking and focusing on the value, which is, hey, where can I create communication time with you? Another one would be consistent sexual intimacy. Instead of, again, coming out of our fear with our expectation and by saying, you just don't love me anymore, or I'm not good enough for you, you just treat me this way. Instead of saying that, what if we just simply say, hey, honey, can we just create a consistent time this month where we can really dive into having some intimacy with each other?
Mm-hmm.
So these are all practical ways of how we could actually implement values and what practical values, would look like in marriage in real time.
So it sounds like value, like having shared values as a couple is paramount here. That's what I'm getting from this. So what makes values so important for couples?
Yeah. So, basically everything that we've just shared. But if I could summarize it, when we have values, we are going to be way more focused. And if my wife and I are more focused on what we want to create in our life, we're actually going to experience intimacy and closeness at a higher level and a higher rate and more frequently. And that's what we all want. So when I can have that in place, now I know which direction we're heading, and we can actually measure it in a practical way. So I'm always trying to tell my couples that if you can't measure your growth, that's why your marriage is actually stuck. That's why you guys feel cold. That's why you guys feel so disconnected, because there's nothing measurable there for you guys. So a lot of people's conflicts come out of having no values at all, which forces them to default to just, well, this is what I expect of you. So that's why values are so important.
Makes a lot of sense, that's for sure. So what can couples do right now to let go of their expectations and communicate their values?
Great question. Number one, spend time writing out your values. And again, I always tell my clients, if you don't write whatever it is that you want to create in your life out on paper, you're actually not committing to anything. So number one, take the time. You can do it on your own or you can do it together, but actually take the time and write out, what are the values that I want in my marriage that will hold us true to this course and allow us to grow closer and intimate with each other? Write that out. That's the number one thing. Okay. So number two, after you write those values out, carve out some really practical things that you guys can do every week or every month. So don't just write these things out and that's it. It's not meant to be a poster that you hang on your wall. So that would be useless, right? So
Yeah.
write these things out and then be super practical about it. So for example, if one of your values is let's create consistent time to communicate, perfect. So let's choose a date now. Which day on the 7-day week will we commit to communicating? And then is there a tool that we can implement that would allow us to actually foster consistent communication once a week? So that's kind of what you can do to build on your marriage.
Very good advice. Rocky, I think we're actually out of time for today. Thank you so much for today's conversation. It was great to talk about expectations, and I think it's a huge hurdle that many couples have to learn to manage and work through. I'm sure this episode actually left a lot to digest for our listeners. And having said that, just a reminder to everyone that Rocky is available for a free consultation. Visit him at claritycoach.ca to set up an appointment. And why don't you tell us and our listeners where else we can find you online?
Yeah, you can literally just go to claritycoach.ca/love talks. You'll absolutely find me there, and you'll find information on how you can reach me there. So please do feel free to, reach out to me by email or phone call.
Excellent. Thanks again. And we will catch you on the next episode of Love Talks, where Rocky talks about why marriage is not a partnership and more, dispelling the myth of what marriage is and is not. That sounds like a really juicy topic, actually. I'm sure that'll be a little bit of a longer episode for us. That's for sure. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. And get in touch with Rocky, of course, anytime for free consultation at claritycoach.ca.
Thanks for listening to the Clarity Coach Podcast with Rockie Lee, Strategic Intervention Coach. If you have any questions regarding Clarity Coach or the Clarity Coach workshops, please call us at 778-883-7203. That's 778-883-7203. And visit us online at www.claritycoach.ca. That's www.claritycoach.ca.